Hello and welcome to In the Picture, where once again we'll be previewing and reviewing this month's highlights in the arts and entertainment in Wales.
You can contact us with comments on the programmes or events you think we should know about. Email us at inthepicture@bbc.co.uk.
On the show tonight.
Rhys Ifans and his new film Once Upon a Time in the Midlands. Danny Absey makes it onto the Booker long list. Photographs of China by Rhodri Jones. And Carl Francis's Maestros and Divas.
First, an interview with Rhys Ifans, the Welsh actor who famously made his mark as Hugh Grant's slacker flatmate in the film Notting Hill. Since that role, some might argue that his career took something of a nosedive with a series of less than impressive films. Now, though, it appears to be on the ascendancy again, with Rhys playing alongside Judi Dench and Kevin Spacey in The Shipping News, and this month with Robert Carlyle in Shane Meadows' Once Upon a Time in the Midlands. We caught up with the wild man of Welsh film at the Edinburgh Film Festival.
Okay, kids, here we go.
Once Upon a Time in the Midlands takes a classic Western movie plot and relocates it to contemporary Nottingham. Rhys Ifans plays a mild-mannered mechanic who has to grow up fast when his girlfriend's ex, Robert Carlyle, comes back to town.
Please don't do anything sexual.
But with a cast that includes Ricky Tomlinson and Kathy Burke, the film is more like The Royal Family than High Noon.
Once upon a time in the Midlands. Yoo-hoo!
Well, Rhys, tell me something about the film Once Upon a Time in the Midlands.
Well, I think they describe it as a tinned spaghetti western. I play a character called Deck, who's living with a girl called Shirley and her daughter. And I proposed to her on a television programme presented by Vanessa Feldt.
The director, Shane Meadows, is one of Britain's most distinctive filmmakers. What was it like working with him?
A joy, you know. I was a big fan of his films before 24/7 and Room for Romeo Brass. And then I got this script and thought it was fantastic. Went to meet Shane and, you know, we got on like a house on fire. He's a very funny man, you know. But he's, you know, often you're asked, you know, in films to sort of improvise around a script, and you're often asked to do that because you're saving someone's ass, you know, or because the writing's not up to scratch. But in this case, you know, the writing was so good, you know, the emotional arc of each character was very clear in the writing, you know. So when we did improvise in this, it was like inspired.
Kathy Burke, Ricky Tomlinson, fantastic lineup. I must say, one who had a great impression of me, apart from yourself, was Finn Atkins.
Yeah.
12-year-old Finn,
Yeah.
who I thought did a fantastic
Yeah.
performance.
Well, hand on my heart, she truly is one of the best actors I've worked with, you know, and she's 12. You know, she hadn't done a film before. She was just professional, focused, generous, and really free, you know, and it's a worry, you know, when you see that in a 12-year-old, and mature, you know. She's more mature than I am now, and I'm 35.
Budget American films and low-budget British films like this one, what are the main differences for you between the two?
Well, I think you find with low-budget films, generally, that more of the crew have read the script. You know, often with big budget.
And Once Upon a Time in the Midlands opens tomorrow. And if you want to talk to Rhys Ifans yourself, then you can log on to our live web chat with Rhys tomorrow afternoon at 4:15 p.m. via our own website, which is www.bbc.co.uk/inthepicture. Now, autumn is fast approaching, and for many in the publishing world, that means just one thing, that it's time for the Booker Prize again. This year's longlist for the prize includes 2 Welsh entries, Fingersmith by Sarah Waters and The Strange Case of Dr. Simmons and Dr. Glass by Danny Absey. I'm joined in the studio to talk about these books by novelist John Williams and Hay Festival director Peter Florence. But before we do, let's hear from Danny Absey himself, who spoke to Caris last week about the origins of his book and about how it feels to be longlisted for the Booker Prize.
Danny Absey, one of Britain's most admired poets, is also an acclaimed novelist and playwright, dividing his time between London and his home here at Ogmore-by-Sea. His latest novel, The Strange Case of Dr. Simmons and Dr. Glass, is a carefully crafted exploration of love, infatuation and deceit. the idea for which arose in an unusual fashion.
There was an exhibition, you know, in the National Gallery called Encounters, where they asked painters to write about a favourite painting. I was asked to write poems that were encounters with foreign poets that I admired, and then I thought it would be a good idea to have an encounter with a fiction, with novel. And the novel I chose was Dr. Glass, which was published in 1905, which I admired for many, many years. And the book Dr. Glass is given to Dr. Simmons with disastrous results.
Dr. Glass is a classic Swedish novel written in the form of a journal. There are many literary echoes between the two men's lives because, like Dr. Glass, Dr. Simmons keeps an explicit record of his thoughts and desires, including his obsession with a beautiful young woman.
May 5th. All this week, each day, I've opened the door of my waiting room to call in the next patient, hoping to discover Yvonne there. Why hasn't she come? Is it because she doesn't wish our relationship to become impersonal, that of doctor and patient? In the ambience of a physician's surgery, the most intimate concerns of the patient can be discussed. The doctor listening may exhibit his sympathy, but not his profound love. The doctor, under clinical circumstances, has to keep his distance, act with propriety. Maybe Yvonne realizes this, would prefer to consult me as a friend rather than as a doctor. Alas, as a doctor I can do little, as a friend I can do less. At least I, being a doctor, have some sanction to confront her husband. But what action should I take should she come? Are there not occasions and honesties when it is just to submit to the holiness of the god Dionysus and to act with evil intent out of pure altruism?
The story is sinister, but nevertheless there's humour as well in the book.
Well, I hope I've got a sense of humour, and so I hope, so I've given it to him. Coleridge once said that comedy is the blossom of the nettle. And of course, the blossom is, I hope, makes people smile, but the nettle is all, in the book all the way through.
What do you hope people reading the book will take away with them?
Pleasure, and if they get insights as well, that's just a plus.
Well, Danny, were you pleased to hear that your novel had successfully made it onto the long list of the Booker Prize?
Yes, I was. I'm very happy to hear about that, and I'd be happier still if I get the short list, and happiest of all if I won.
Let's hope so. Thank you very much for your time.
Hello, John, and of course, hello, Peter. Now, I just wanted to start off by asking you exactly how important do you think this long list is? I mean, it's only been published for the last 2 years, I think, and it struck me that booksellers aren't really taking that much notice of it. Is that fair, Peter?
It's a marketing exercise. I mean, if more British people and British writers get onto the list as a result of the long list being published, then it just gives a lift, or gets a momentum. This book has passed almost without notice in publication. Suddenly, because it's on the long list, people are taking notice of it, it's being reviewed, it's getting a little more exposure.
Having said that, I had to go into about 4 or 5 different bookshops until I could actually find a copy. I mean, what do you think about this, John, as someone who actually writes yourself?
Well, I think the thing about the Booker Prize, the danger of it tends to be that it makes everyone think, okay, I only need to read one book this year, it's been chosen for me. So I think we went from really only knowing what the winner was to having the short list, which hopefully gave half a dozen books a shout. And now this is a rather hopeful punt at getting the public to take notice of 20 books or whatever it is, you know. Whether it'll work remains to be seen, but you know, as Peter says, the more serious books come to the public attention, the better.
And I suppose here we are, and we're actually talking about 2 of them. I mean, now, if we could start with the strange case of Dr. Simmons and Dr. Glass. We heard there how this book sort of came about by an encounter with an existing work of fiction. Do you think that encounter has worked, Peter?
Well, I wasn't aware that the original work of fiction was real. I thought Danny had invented both of them. And I was thinking, God, this is really clever. I like it. And what isn't apparent if you haven't read the first one is how the reading of the Swedish book in Danny's novel, how accurate it is, how much it's a perversion, how much he's talking about the act of reading and the act of translating. I I felt slightly anxious in plotting terms because he doesn't jazz with it and he doesn't screw it around as much as you think he might.
Now, John, would you say that? Do you think it is a good read?
There's lots of things I really like about the book. I think the sense of time and place, it's mostly set in a sort of bohemian London around Swiss Cottage and Hampstead in the late 40s. And I'm a sucker for that kind of London lowlife. And, you know, the feeling of that is great. And the sense, you know, that Danny brings to the book from being a doctor himself, you know, the way the doctor sees the patients, you know, all that is very nice stuff. But I did feel, you know, that this kind of remake of another novel really hamstrung it as a, you know, as a story, because you pretty much know from the beginning what's going to happen. And
So you're actually not that surprised?
no,
Yeah.
you know, I thought maybe I was
No.
going to be, but I was.
It's a problem. Well, I'm actually moving on to Fingersmith by Sarah Waters. Now, in this novel, she's tried to pull off an authentic Victorian voice. Again, do you think that that has worked, Peter?
I have a kind of anxiety about this historical fiction. It's like reproduction furniture too often. You know, you think you're buying a Victorian house, you fill it with modern furniture, or you fill it with the real stuff. But what I think you're aiming at, if you're a writer doing this, is you're either trying to take the Victorian novel in a different direction, or you're trying to make some specific comment about contemporary life through the sort of distance and the angle of Victorian values. And what you've got the three-decker, you've got the wonderful convolutions of plot. The twist, and I don't think, although it is a thriller, it's not too much of a giveaway given Sarah Waters' profile to say that the twist is that it's girl meets girl. Now, the fact that there isn't very much girl-on-girl Victorian novels that we are familiar with, there aren't very many of them that we're familiar with, I wonder if that's sort of enough. I mean, again, it's a cracking read. It's, you know, you will do it in 3 big chunks, but
at the same time, I'm sensing that you're not actually that keen on the book. I mean,
I like it. I don't love any of the characters. The wonderful sense that sexuality is being explored and she's allowing different possibilities from what we're used to in Victorian fiction is great, but I don't... maybe I'm judging it on the kind of highest levels. I want the mysteries of the human heart to be open to me, and I'm not. I'm sort of interested in the plot, but I don't love the characters.
is that how you feel, John? Do you agree?
Something a bit like that. I mean, I think that the book is, you know, it's an entertainment. It's, you know, it's full of very rich kind of Victorian language. You know, some of it's authentic, some of it feels, you know, that it's Sarah Waters' own inventions. And there's a lot of fun in the book. And, you know, as Peter says, you know, the way it sort of plays with what we expect, what we think about Victorian morality. But I do think it's really, it's very smart, very nice, but it's an entertainment. I wasn't moved, you know, I didn't...
I just wanted to pin you down on who do you think is the most likely winner of the final Booker Prize. John, you first?
I'm getting a sense that Howard Jacobson's going to be a decent bet.
And Peter?
I'd love it to be Howard, but I think it'll be Ray Hinton mystery, and I'd be thrilled if either of the Welsh contenders got on.
Thank you very much, Peter, and of course, thank you very much, John.
It's time now to have a look at what's on in and around Wales this month. Firstly, we head up to North Wales, and here are a few ideas of what to do and where to go. In Mold, Theatr Clwyd have George Eliot's Silas Marner. It's on from September the 19th to October the 12th. At Theatr Ardudwy in Harlech, Mid Wales Opera present Rossini's Cinderella, and it's on for one night only on September the 28th. Canolfan Ucheldrain in Holyhead, there's an exhibition by the North Wales Potters. That runs until October the 7th. Bangor Theatr Gwynedd present a new version of Saunders Lewis's Blodeuwedd. Dates are the 24th till the 28th of September. And in Conwy, the Royal Cambrian Academy hold their annual summer exhibition, and that closes on September the 14th. There's more information about all these events on our website. Check it out on www.bbc.co.uk/in-the-picture. Right, I'm joined now in the studio by Carl Francis. He's Wales's most distinguished film director, with credits including Boy Soldier, Street Life, and most recently one of the Hollywood 10. In a new series for BBC Wales, Maestro Diva, he talks to actors, singers and directors about the nitty-gritty of the craft. Carl, you're very welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
Before we have a quick chat, Let's take a look at one of the programmes and see what the comedy producer, Gareth Gwenlan, has to say.
We have a huge audience here tonight to find out how we can create better comedy in Wales and learn about it. So, is there a knack to it?
There must be, but sadly I haven't discovered it. If there is a knack, it's the knack that there is in everything in life. It's persistence. It's trying and trying and trying. It's having a comedy rhythm within you, and it is the burning desire to actually make it work. It's no easy way. We are blessed in this country. We've probably got the finest bunch of actors in the English-speaking world. By that I mean actors and actresses, obviously. I'm trying to be politically correct. And you can cast any part written probably half a dozen times with equal success. But the shortage is in writers. Because I don't care how funny you are in the pub, I don't care how funny you are in company, most good comedy actors don't, in spite of people's belief, make up their own words. It comes from a carefully honed, carefully worked script.
Gareth Gwenlan there, chatting and giving some advice and tips. Well, Carl, as I said, you're very welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
Firstly, where did the idea for Maestro Diva stem from?
It stemmed from the fact that I work with a lot of very talented people, you know, actors, writers, producers, and all you ever read about in the papers are their sex lives, the size of their breasts, the size of their backsides, you know, and they have enormous talent, and I'm just curious why we don't have shows about the actual talent of people and how they redefine the talent and sort of nurture it. So that's where it came from. I was a bit angry reading about some of my friends being molested in the media, so I came up with the idea.
Now, the series has already started, featuring guests such as Charlotte Church, Matthew Rhys, as we saw Gareth Gwenlan. Who else will be in the programmes?
Alan France is a composer, conductor who conducts the Berlin Symphony Orchestra. He's from Merthyr. He's, he slags off the music industry. He basically says that the music in Britain is totally under-rehearsed. Helen McCrory, who's a great actress, and she's great. Next week's show is actually Matthew Rhys. He comes up with a really great tip to actors. He says the object of the actor is to put a look on the other actor's face. It's full of tips like this. So if you're an actor or want to be an actress, it's exactly the sort of show you should watch.
You're talking about tips. I think it's very educational because at the end of the programmes you have practical tips.
Yeah, practical tips at the end. So, you see, people who watch these shows really want to learn. You know, you can mix learning with entertainment, and that's what we've tried to do with the studio audience, with some documentary material, travelling with people. And it's quite exciting, actually. It's quite an interesting format.
I think you portray a stream of talented artists throughout the programme. What do you think that you've learnt from Maestro Diva and meeting and obviously listening to all these people giving advice?
Well, I learned an awful lot from each individually. I mean, Charlotte Church is a wonderful artist, but very tough and very kind, a very kind woman. You know, Matthew lives on the edge, so it's exciting working with an actor who's, neurotic like De Niro, but brilliantly talented. So you learn something from each of them. You know, Helen is just slow, careful, and absolutely brilliant. It's hard to say, you know. I mean, Alan Francis kicks me off the show and says, I'll do this myself. So you go with the flow. It's exciting.
Did that go down well?
I went on very well with him. Yeah, I don't know about me, but it was fine. No, that's what it's about. You've got to, when you make programs, they've got to be exciting. They've got to be, you can have an exciting show that's also truly educational. And I think that's what Welsh people want.
And totally relaxed, I think, as well. Finally, what do you hope to get out of the programme, Maestro Diva?
I hope that people who watch it will realise that to become a major actor or become an actor, a star, you have to work at it. And the show teaches people how to go about that. And I hope the students in the colleges throughout Wales, I hope the wannabes, all the kids from 5 to 50, actually talk about the show and say, I got something out of that, and this is what I'm doing. They can improve their lives and improve the quality of art, of theatre, of music, of literature in Wales, you know.
On that note, thanks very much, Carl, for joining us tonight. And you can see Maestro Diva on BBC Two Wales, Tuesdays at 10 p.m.
There are two films that stand out from the crowd this month, and both are long-awaited follow-ups to their British director's successful first features. The first of these is Christopher Nolan's Insomnia, which comes close on the heels of his offbeat success Memento. And if you enjoyed that film, then you are going to love this one. Insomnia is a remake of a Norwegian film of the same title, and Nolan sticks close with the original plot, with Al Pacino playing seasoned cop William Dormer on the trail of a killer under the Alaskan midnight sun. And there's the problem. Will Dormer find his man before he loses his senses in a state where 10 at night looks just like 10 in the morning?
Dormer here. Hello?
Can't sleep, Will? Me neither.
Who's this?
I got a nap this afternoon, but I guess you had to work.
Who am I speaking to?
You get rid of your clock yet? Won't really help. When I first moved up here, I once went 5 nights. Can you believe that? It's crazy light.
A name or I'm gonna hang up.
No, you're not. You need the company. Nothing as lonely as not sleeping.
It's Al Pacino's world-weary, smouldering cop that rules the screen in this film, but he's supported by a raft of impressive performances. In an interesting bit of casting against type, Robin Williams manages to shake off his schmaltzy past to portray a genuinely creepy murderer.
Killing changes you, you know that. It's not guilt. I never meant to do it.
You're trying to impress me, Finch, because you got the wrong guy. Killing that girl made you feel special, but you're not.
Hilary Swank is understated but brilliant as a young rookie who suspects that Dormer may be lacing his good cop intentions with some bad cop practices.
It's so incredible to be working with you, Detective Dormer. I've followed all of your cases, Theodore Danelli, Frank Prudhomme, the Ocean Park shootings, and especially the Leland Street murders. Is that where Ronald Langley cut you in the basement of 325 Leland Street?
You certainly did your homework, Detective.
The Leland Street murders was my case study at the academy. So I'm gonna just take you guys over to the lodge and
No,
drop
just
your
take us to
bags.
the station.
Right. We need to get started. Most homicides are solved by work done in the first 72 hours.
Well, it's 48 hours. We're a day behind. But who's counting?
Insomnia, then, is that rare thing, an accomplished thriller complete with chase scenes and shootouts that also manages to present the viewer with some hazy moral outcomes. You may see the ending coming a long way off, but whether you'll work out how it gets there is another matter. Sam Mendes has followed up American Beauty, his take on the suburban American dream, with Road to Perdition, a film about that other mythic American landscape, the Chicago ganglands of the 30s. So as with Insomnia, there's some fine heavyweight acting from Paul Newman as gangland boss John Rooney, and some more casting against type with everyone's favourite hero Tom Hanks as vengeful hired gun Mike Sullivan.
You can't protect them forever. If it wasn't this, it'd be something else. Natural law. Sons are put on this earth to trouble their fathers.
Less convincing is Jude Law, who goes into character acting overdrive as the seedy assassin Maguire. But at the heart of this film is the father-son relationship between Sullivan and his son Michael. It's when Michael witnesses the gruesome details of his father's job that he triggers a wave of bloodshed and their road trip of survival.
So when do I get my share of the money?
Well, how much do you want?
$200.
Okay, deal.
Could I have had more?
You'll never know.
With a background in the theatre, perhaps it is no surprise that Mendes pulls off some impressive set pieces. Look out especially for the final showdown in the rain. But as a whole, this film is more comic book than epic. It's certainly more ambitious than American Beauty, but as successful, well, not for my money.
45 miles an hour, that's a little fast. Look out for the tractor, Michael. Michael, look out for the tractor coming up now. Watch out for the tractor. Watch out for the tractor! Watch out for the tractor!
We made it.
Oh, yeah, we made it.
Now, if you're looking for places to visit, things to do in the West Wales area, then just sit back and here are a few suggestions of what you can do this September. The Torch Theatre in Milford Haven features a production of Dylan Thomas's Growing Up, and that runs until September the 14th. Throughout September, Swansea is set to be transformed by Locust 2, a citywide festival of installation art. The National Library in Aberystwyth has portraits by David Griffiths. That closes on October the 5th. And at Aberystwyth Arts Centre this month, the National Youth Theatre of Wales present a new version of Wojciech.
Rhodri Jones is a documentary photographer of an international standard. His most recent collection of photographs, Made in China, is a portrait of the People's Republic which is taken over a period of 5 years. The result is a sensitive and a probing observation of an ancient country which is going through an extraordinary transition.
Rhodri Jones was born in North Wales and is now based in Italy. He's worked all over the world, but Made in China is very much a personal project.
The fascinating thing about China is the rate of change. There are phenomena which are happening now in China, which we experienced perhaps 250 years ago. They calculate that approximately 10% of the Chinese population, which means 130 million people, are currently moving from the country areas to the cities. And also these cities are changing at an incredible rate and growing at an incredible rate. So that particular photograph for me is a kind of border zone between the new city being built and the culture of the shepherd and his lifestyle, which hasn't changed for centuries. There are actually 56 national minorities in the People's Republic of China. I had a particular interest in looking at the changes from the perspective of these minority cultures. These people actually come from what was a fairly fertile area, but have been moved as volunteers into the Chulan settlement. There will be 30,000 families living there probably by now. And it's a very bleak place. The photograph, for me, it's almost as if this kid is hitting his father, saying, why in the hell did you bring me here? And the expression on the father's face is, well, how could I avoid this? There's been a fair amount of media coverage of things in China, but I always find that media coverage is quite bitty. I prefer to have a kind of a fuller picture, so I prefer to go and see places for myself.
Now I'm joined in the studio by photographer Paul Seawright and theatre performer Mike Pearson. Hello, and welcome to the show. Now, Paul, if I could ask you first, what were your initial thoughts on this book?
It'd be fair to say I find it difficult to get enthusiastic about it. I think the photographs are excellent. I think you couldn't criticise the strength of the photographs, but I have a problem with the book as a concept. I mean, Philip Jones Griffiths in his introduction says that it's a marvellous story by a poet with a camera.
He really does actually talk him up. I mean, do you think that Jones Griffiths is sort of slipping into hyperbole, Mike?
I think with the phrases like the juggernaut of modernity and a witness to change, I think in a way he is, and it puts a kind of unfortunate frame around the work. I went to see the exhibition in the Turner Gallery and read the commentary first, and I think it really did affect my reading of the photographs, which I think are extremely well hung in Penarth. I have to say, I think the exhibition is good.
It struck me, that actually reading through the book, that there was a real attempt here to tell some sort of a story with these photographs. Do you think that has actually been a successful attempt, Paul?
No, I don't think so, and I think actually, I mean, Rodri says in the piece you've just shown that he wanted to do something different than what maybe the mainstream media have done and do something in greater depth. Photographically, maybe he's achieved that, but there's very little text in the book, maybe no more than 1,000 words. There's, you know, the story, as it were, is certainly not expounded.
What do you think that we do actually learn about China from these photographs, Paul?
See, that's the problem for me. I don't think we learn that much about the Chinese people. I think we see lots of photographs of Chinese people. There's 130, maybe more photographs in the book, and there's no more than 3 that are actually inside anywhere. So, you know, I think that kind of maybe says something about the photographer kind of wandering around through the country making photographs of people on the street. You don't feel you really get under the skin of the people. You don't find out what their real social and cultural problems are. We don't get inside their houses or their schools, and I think that's the weakness of the book.
Is that fair, Mike, do you think?
I think so, though. The photographs that most appealed to me were those of pure physical action, and I thought there were some expositions of spirit there in a way. A youth practicing martial arts who seems to be standing on his head in the street. But those are photographs which I don't really need a caption. I think that's why they appeal to me.
Yes, so thank you very much, Mike, and thank you, Paul. And you can see Rodri Jones's photographs of China at the Turner House Gallery until October the 20th. Now, this month sees the first anniversary of the attacks on the World Trade Center. One man who was at the heart of that event was the BBC's North America business correspondent, Stephen Evans, who was also one of the first to speak out critically about aspects of the media coverage. Here, he talks to In the Picture about that day 1 year on.
Our New York business correspondent, Stephen Evans, was in the World Trade Center when the planes hit the towers. Stephen was telling a local New York television station what he'd seen when, during the interview, one of the towers collapsed behind him.
We had that big explosion from much, much lower. I don't know what on earth caused that. The thing that strikes me is, one, the terribleness of the incident, whatever the cause, and we don't go into politics, but whatever the cause, the terribleness, the hugeness of what's happened. So huge, in fact, that most of the people around simply can't understand what happened. People were just standing around, talking at each other, nodding their heads. Oh my God. We gotta go.
24-hour news coverage has completely changed the way events like this are covered. Thing that became clear to me very, very quickly, minutes after it, I was on the air to London on a phone from the site, literally, I don't know, 5 minutes after the thing had happened. The first plane had gone in and before the second plane had gone in. And very, very quickly, people in London, presenters in London on the radio knew far more about the event than I knew. What I can remember particularly was in the days after September the 11th, a lot of the US networks kept using that image of the plane going into the tower, and it was used pretty well every hour, on the hour, almost like a sting, and I just thought that was too much. It became, I thought, pornographic. It's an amazing image, a compelling image, but it's a bit like craning your neck to look at a car crash. You can't quite stop looking at those pictures, but I don't think they should be played, well, in the case of the people jumping from the buildings, at all to the public. I don't quite know why. It just seems a bit dwelling on misery. Personally, I don't dwell, I think, very much on the detail of the day. I think the whole of this city feels like it's moved on. One of the things which is strange is if you go to Ground Zero now, you get all the tourist stores and it feels very, very tacky. It feels like a great big tourist trap, really. But I think the city feels it's something terrible that happened, something very big that happened that you have to think about quietly and very slowly over time. But actually, in terms of your lives, well, you move on.
Now, Mike, we heard Stephen there talking about the filmed images being used in an almost pornographic way. Would you agree?
I think repetition's inevitable. I think that's our contemporary state in a way. And in one way, we are fascinated by those images. I think the difficulty is for us is to get beyond them, to the detail of what happened. And I'm of the opinion now, perhaps, that we'll best get there through stories, through the stories, the detail of the stories that happened there. And I think when we finally hear the telephone messages and messages that were left on answer phones.
Do you think that we should hear those? 'Cause I mean, It's the same issue,
I think
isn't
we
it,
should.
really?
I really do think we should, because
So you
I
think that there should almost be a complete public access to everything that went on?
Personally, I do think so. I think Stephen Evans elsewhere has written very interestingly about this, because he said somewhere, when I first phoned, I didn't know what the story was, you know, as if the story has to be constructed at a later date, whereas I think that footage of him there in the moment is the most effective transmission that he made. And also his idea that he took a long time to find an appropriate tone. I don't think there is an appropriate tone.
What would you say, Paul? I mean, you must have seen those images like all of us, and it was a massive event. So wasn't the seeing of that plane on that loop, wasn't it almost justified?
I think so. I mean, I have no problem with seeing it on that loop. I mean, you've got to remember that this was something entirely unique in media terms. For us to actually witness something live. I mean, not the first plane crash, but certainly the buildings collapsing and so on. So many people by that stage had gathered around their televisions to watch that actually happening. And it was so unusual, so far removed from our reality, as it were, that people needed to see it over and over again for confirmation that it was actually real. I mean, it's many people talked about it in cinematic terms.
Well, actually, that was something that I was going to ask you. I mean, that in this sort of paradoxical way, don't you think that actually those images almost kind of made the events stand off at some sort of distance, as some sort of film?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think we were already prepared for, you know, visually prepared for those kind of images from Hollywood cinema. And that's why people almost had to have a second or third look, you know, did those planes really hit that building? And I think, you know, the uniqueness of that film footage makes it difficult to penetrate beyond it. You know, we haven't really heard those stories that, you know, Mike talked about, because it's difficult to get past the spectacular nature of those early images.
Have those images actually changed the way that either of you will use still images and moving images in your own work? Has it changed it much for you, Mike?
Yes, it has. I find it much more difficult to think of iconic images, images that represent kind of hand-in-glove something, and I'm interested in much more ephemeral kind of work at the moment, the kind of city projects that I've been doing recently. It's difficult to know who are the performers, who are the spectators, and so on, but using things like surveillance technology, because in a way we're all being looked at now at the moment anyway.
Has it actually changed the way that you think about how your photographs that you take, how they might be used?
Not particularly, because I think much of my work is actually about avoiding the spectacular moment and the incident. I mean, it's about conflict, but it's about kind of the unvisual kind of side of conflict. So, I mean, what's changed for me is I've actually been to Afghanistan on, doing a commission in response to what happened after the September 11th attack, and I don't think I'd have gone and done a commission like that, except that I think it's such a pivotal, historically such a pivotal thing that I think I might have something to contribute.
Thank you very much, Paul C. Wright and Mike Pearson.
Time now to catch up with some of the events that are happening in and around the South Wales area this month, and here are a few ideas. The Vale of Glamorgan Festival celebrates the best of contemporary classical music. It runs at various venues until September the 11th. At the Rhondda Heritage Park until October the 13th, there's a new exhibition, Not the Stillness, by painter Brendan Burns. Starting on September the 14th is the Welsh National Opera's new production of Die Fledermaus. And in complete contrast, the Coliseum Aberdare has Frank Vickery's new play, Breaking the String, and that runs until the 29th of September.
Well, that's it for this month.
But to play us out tonight, a track from the much-missed Catatonia, whose greatest hits are out this week. Good night.
Good night.